Hi everyone, I'm Grace Grogan. Paul Cannon and I live and travel full-time in a motorhome. We found a unique spot to experience the extreme tides of the Bay of Fundy in the Minas Basin of the Annapolis Valley. Travel with us through the beautiful landscape of Grande Pre, Nova Scotia, Canada. This map shows the Grande Pre landscape. The arrow was where our campground was located, and we had to drive through the dykes to get there. We will be taking you to points both on and off the map to experience the highest tides in the world at the Bay of Fundy and share the history of the dykes that goes back to the 1680s. While driving, we came upon a vantage point overlooking the lands of the peninsula. We passed farms growing apples, plums, onions, corn, and cauliflower on our drive. In the distance, you can see the Bay of Fundy, and there is also a small inlet that is only mud because of low tide. At high tide, that inlet fills with water. While driving the area, we discovered this footbridge and sign that reads, "Notice, tide water covers the road on extreme high tide. Park beyond dead tree on extreme high tide." We could not find the dead tree and went back the next day at high tide, but there was no water. The height of tides range from about 11 feet in the southwest shore of Nova Scotia to up to 53 feet at the head of the bay in the Minas Basin. The land of Evangeline Beach was just down from our campground. It is one of the places tourists are directed to for experiencing Bay of Fundy tides. This video was taken about 1 hour before low tide. The ground was very wet and mucky, so we did not go down and walk the beach. It is amazing how far the water has receded. Just below the land in the distance, you can see a band of water. The steps to the beach were marked, "Use at your own risk." The photos and video here were taken about 10 minutes before high tide. The steps that we could have walked down at low tide now have water splashing 2 up from the bottom. The beach that stretched into the horizon a few hours ago is now covered in water. I had ventured a bit down the steps, but Paul remained on the observation deck. I'm ready to climb back up. Hey, Paul! Wave at everyone! The North Grande Pre Community Church, circa 1861, is built in the style typical of the planter era. It is located in what was originally called Mesadec, meaning separated, by the Miakalak, who are the First Nations people, then Grande Pre, which means Great Meadow, by the Acadians, and Long Island by the New England planters. In the early 20th century, it was officially named Grande Pre. We came across this ramp and bridge to what appears may have once been an attached dock. Look how far the water goes up on the shore and rocks. During low tide, you can see how far out the water has receded. There is nothing to the left, and you can see how far out it is to the right. Here are the same docks from a different vantage point. It appears that there is a ramp and two docks. This shows the difference in the height of the water between high tide and low tide. A park discovered on our travels had a nice beach area for viewing the changes in the tide. Both days we were there, the tide was at two different levels, low tide and 2 hours past high tide. I was able to view two waterfalls from the beach, and the water flow was considerably heavier when the tide was only partially out. I'm standing on the beach. I was here yesterday at much later in the day when it was much lower tide, and where I walked yesterday, right in here, still has flowing water because the tide is no longer at high tide. It's already started going out. We're about 2 hours past high tide, but as you can see, it still has not gone down. The beach I've walked on actually it's very rocky. Came down that stairway. Paul did not come down with me. But the ground is quite wet. For instance, the seaweed down here is very soggy. Nice vantage point of the water going out. Yesterday people were walking out past that where that jut of rock sticks out, and here you can see where the beach has started receding. And there is another waterfall down there in the distance. I did not walk down to it yesterday. The path is a lot more wet though, and looks like a little more packed down, so I may give that a shot in a little bit. I'm not sure. Beautiful colors and red rocks. Today we have been going around chasing some of the spots that we took photographs at during low tide yesterday and trying to catch them with a little bit more water in them, such as at the wharf, that type of thing where you can see the boats on the docks have slid up and down. So good day shooting, about 59 degrees, so pleasantly sunny and warm. Watch the stripe on the ground. It will appear in each photo as we get closer to the rock formation. Also notice the difference in the amount of water on the beach and in the rocks based on low tide and 2 hours past high tide. On to the other waterfall. So there it is. Yesterday it was a trickle and I did not walk down here. So you can see here where the ground is wet and the tide is now going back out. So the path that I walked on, definitely wet. There were a few slippery, slidey spots, but you see that stairway there in the distance. That's the stairway I came down, and the path there that I walked. So not too bad. Paul's probably wondering what happened to me because he took some shots from up above and then is probably chilling in the Jeep waiting for me. And then we will be moving on to see some other vantage points that we partook in yesterday, and tomorrow we're probably going to go drive around the dike system, which is very near the campground that we are staying at. There was a dike system built in the late 1700s by the Acadians. So there you go. Bye. Harbor is a great place to experience Bay of Fundy tides. The difference between high and low tides never ceases to amaze when you experience them in person. The boats have supports built into them that keep them upright and protect the propeller when on solid ground. The height of the tide when looking at the floating dock and fishing boats is impressive. The water flowing out of the pipe at low tide would be flowing into the pipe and moving upstream during high tide. Hall's Harbor is near Kentworth and Wolfville, Nova Scotia. It was named after Samuel Hall, who was a pilot and guide to a privateer band raiding into Nova Scotia in 1779. In 1836, the first pier was built at the harbor. A wide variety of fish could be caught in the area. Just offshore is an area called the Eddy, where the water moves in two directions and provides catch of both fresh and saltwater fish. In the early days, the number of lobster traps set was 30 to 35 per fisherman. Today it is 250 to 300 per fisherman. Lobster used to be so abundant that they were used to feed hired labor, and poor children were embarrassed to have to take lobster sandwiches to school. The luxury was eating bologna. Salmon was also plentiful and was used as fertilizer. We noticed this arched rock formation in the water and photographed it at different tide heights. At partial tide, the land shows that the area is not empty of water. When the tide is out, the land mass shows that there is another arch not seen during high tide. There is a shine on the land, and that is caused by the sun hitting the wet mud. This boat and dock were along the road we were driving. The arched rock can be seen in the background. The boat's friend must have come for a visit, and how do we know? Because at low tide there are two boats sitting side by side on the ground. It appears the boat and floating dock have both receded during low tide. Look at the erosion levels on the land by the trees. We came upon this boat docked on land. It is not a normal thing to see a boat out of use in this area. This little building is cute. It does not appear to be a working lighthouse. Maybe a cabin? Here are more discoveries while exploring. We heard there were waterfalls, but they are hard to find. The one with two waterfalls was especially difficult. We had to park in what appeared to be private property and walk down a boat dock to see it. These berries are on rowan trees, also called American mountain ash. They have showy white flowers in the spring and summer, and in the fall have orange berries that feed several species of birds and mammals. Horton Landing holds much history. The deportation cross commemorates the forced march in 1755 of 10,000 Acadians. They were deported to the American colonies because they refused to swear unconditional allegiance to the British Crown. After the end of the 7-Year War in 1763, many returned and formed a community. This monument commemorates the 1760 to 1768 immigration of 8,000 planters who took and farmed the lands of deported Acadians. To access Horton Landing, we had to drive on a farmer's property, and the Holstein cows kept us company. You can see an old railroad trestle in the background. The Covenanter Church is the oldest existing Presbyterian church in Canada. You can see one headstone in the photo, and there is a small graveyard beside it. This church was constructed in 1804, and its architectural design is described as being typical 18th century New England meeting house. Notice the grouped family seating areas. The church was home to a Reformed Presbyterian Church of Ireland congregation, commonly referred to as Covenanters, hence the church name. We came upon the beach of Kingsport by the sea. During the 1800s, Kingsport was a major shipbuilding center, and in the 1890s, connection with the Cornwallis Valley Railroad made Kingsport the most important transportation terminus on the Minas Basin for both ship and rail. From 1949 to 1979, the area had a lucrative fishing industry where a crew of 3 men could land 40,000 pounds of flounder, haddock, and cod in a 3 to 4 hour period. Catch limits were set in the 1980s and the fishing industry was no longer feasible. Here are some additional photos taken as we were driving the area. The areas with mud would be underwater at high tide. We would pass this sign on our way to the campground. The Grande Pre dykes consist of 3,013 acres below sea level and are protected behind 28,455 feet of dykes. In the 1680s, the Acadians settled and reclaimed this intertidal land that has tides over 11 meters or 36 feet. They used traditional techniques of dykes, wooden sluices, and drainage network in a community-based management system that is still in use today. The necessity of the dykes to maintain the farmland can be seen by the differences in how much water changes between high tide and low tide in the area. This video was taken walking on a dike at about 1/2 hour past high tide. The dike lands were first established by the Acadians and were later expanded and maintained by New England planters, English and Scottish immigrants in the 19th and 20th centuries, and Dutch settlers after World War II. Farmlands in the deep drainage network. You can see the protection provided by the dikes during high tide. Without them, farming the area would not be possible. We drove on a public road to access this viewing spot of the dikes. The sign about entering dike land private roads was for the areas of farmland throughout the area. I captured a photo of the Jeep sitting on the dikes, and when you look at the road, look to the right and notice the edge of the dike and its height. This video was taken while walking on top of the dike at low tide. The area looks out over the Guzzle, which is a channel of water that separates Boot Island from Long Island and Grande Pre, and until the 1970s could be crossed at low tide. The Guzzle was created in the 1860s by the rise of sea level and erosion from waves and ice blocks in the Minas Basin. It continues to erode at about 1 meter or 3 feet 3 inches per year. We wonder if this was the path used to access Boot Island. We are on Little Island, which is the site of an original planter home site that was moved in 1880 to another spot on Long Island due to threatening erosion. Look at the height of the dike we are walking on in the distance. Here you can see what the dike looks like with the tide out. A plowed farmer's field in the dike, and mud ridges left behind in one of the drainage areas. The wet, muddy ridges have a sheen to them in the sun. Thank you from Paul and I for watching. We hope you enjoyed our photo tour showing the extreme tides and landscape of Grande Pre, which is Canada's 16th World Heritage Site, located on the Bay of Fundy's Minas Basin in Nova Scotia's Annapolis Valley. Please feel free to share our photo tour with all your friends. Give us a big thumbs up and leave your comments below. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified each time a new video comes out. Till next time, Paul and I are rolling through North America and want you to travel with us.